Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the portals of International Institute of Jammu and Kashmir Studies and Analysis. I extend a very heartily welcome to all our guests, speakers, panelists, and observers to this webinar, Statehood for Jammu, Reality or Myth. ITSA is a brainchild of Brigadier Dr. Vijay Sagar Dhiman, who convened this platform for independent and impartial academic research on the issues of plaguing the state of Jammu and Kashmir ever since its formation in 1841 in the entirety. There has been sea of controversies around the political unit. Every player or stakeholder has tried to convey the facts as per its agenda. As a result, the truth never come out and the citizens of this beautiful state are still suffering whether they belong to Jammu and Kashmir or to Ladakh. In search of true people's voices, today we are here to discuss the demand of statehood for Jammu from Jammu division of J&K. So for the moderation of discussion, I would now like to hand it over to Brigadier Dr. Vijay Sagar Dhiman.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to the portals of International Institute of J&K Studies and Analysis, that is ITSA, today evening for a webinar that is Statehood for Jammu, a myth or a reality. So we will be discussing this particular issue. We have some esteemed panel over here. The speakers, Mr. Ankur Sharma could not come for medical reasons. There's some medical emergency. And we have Dr. Ajay Charangu, who was a chairman Panoon Kashmir, based in Jammu for a long time. Then we also have Mr. Jagmohan Sharma, an intellectual common man who has served in Jammu and served pan-India and has a perspective of the pulse of Jammu in a very, very thorough manner. Then we also have Colonel Satish Lalhotra. Then we have Dr. Ajay Charangu, who was a chairman Panoon Kashmir, based in Jammu for a long time.
The entire constitution building process of Jammu and Kashmir was allowed to be dominated by the National Conference, which was primarily a Muslim party. Hindus recognized it like that, Buddhists recognized it like that, and there was, in Kashmir, particularly the Hindus of Kashmir recognized as a communal party. It was just in name secular. For a brief period, till the accession took place, for a brief period, for tactical reasons, a secular posture was sustained by National Conference, and subsequently, the entire governance over the years, decades, was establishment of Muslim precedent, consolidation of it, and then erosion of both the politics, power, as well as the demographics of Jammu and Ladakh. This type of a process continued all these years. In 1990, this Muslim state of Jammu and Kashmir eventually witnessed the upsurge of radical Islamic terrorism, which dislodged or unleashed genocide on the Hindu minority living in Kashmir. Hindus of Kashmir were subjected to a genocide. A thorough religious cleansing was accomplished, and the state of India described this whole happening as a simple migration. There was more or less a consensus across the strategic fraternity as well as the political class to underplay the ideological underpinnings of the separatist movement in Kashmir. In fact, to secularize it in the national discourse, concocting reasons for it and then trying to somehow continue this contract which was hammered with National Conference or the Muslim leadership of Kashmir over there, continue it as a national imperative, continue it as a strategic imperative. That process started getting unfolded immediately after 90, when the Hindus were pushed out. Now, having said this thing, in this whole process, the population of Jammu, the population of Ladakh, and the population of Kashmir, they were interlocked in a political process, which had to be essentially a process which consolidated Muslim precedent. Now in this process, the erosion of not only the secular nation building, the basic political power of Jammu and Ladakh started happening. So if broadly we talk about the population percentages, the Hindus of Jammu and Kashmir constituted at one time almost the 42% of the population of the state. Hindus and say other non-Muslims. In Jammu, it was 60-40 ratio in favor of the Hindus. In Kashmir, it was almost 94% population, which was Muslim. Now, not only the separate constitution of J&K state, which guaranteed, which ultimately created a structure, a constitutional structure, and ultimately a governance, which essentially had to be a governance for Muslim presidents in the state. Not only was this done, what happened simultaneously in the state over the years was that the demographic expansion of Muslim population started happening both into Ladakh as well as into Jammu. And the demographic cleansing of Hindus in Kashmir had already been accomplished. 2000, from 1981, the census, the operations which took place, 1991 census could not happen in J&K state because the situation was very bad. In 2001, also the situation was very bad. From 2001 to 2011, the 2001 census and the 2011 census, these census operations happened at a time when Muslim separatist forces had thoroughly entrenched into the political process. And there were apprehensions being raised by the political leaders. In 2001, the top political leadership of Jammu, they did try to broach this subject with the then Home Minister of India, L.K. Advani, that the situation, either there should be mixed teams for the census operations, or the census operations should be postponed because the administrative spheres have been thoroughly subverted at all levels. So we are not going to have a free and fair census operations in the state. These things were ignored. So what happened that between 2001 and 2011, and once the 2011 census report started coming out, we could see that the population, Hindu population of Jammu had almost gone down from 40%, more than 40%, to just more than 28%. This more than 10% fall of the population in any other country would have been taken as a catastrophic situation. And commissions would have been created to understand what has happened. How does it happen? But in India, as usual, to hide the compromises, fundamental compromises which were made in Jammu and Kashmir, this whole process was ignored. We had a process in which, we had an election process in which from Jammu, BJP got 25 MLAs, and then a compromise process guided by the same consideration of handing over virtually their party to the PDP, ultimately resulting in a spate of such humiliating, disgusting incidents and not insulting incidents for the nation. And then when the support from the Mahbooba Mufti government was withdrawn and the government fell. See, Article 370 was removed last year. It's now more than a year since it was removed. At that time, we thought probably the whole cycle of this internal subversion, of describing abdication as tactics, of describing virtually capitulation as strategy, that cycle has probably ended. We described the removal of Article 370 as removal of the imperialist albatross from the neck of India. Article 370 was the legacy of the Cold War politics, in which India was caught up in the late 40s and subsequently. Article 370 was reflected also the imperialist stranglehold of India by the imperialist powers. Article 370 also represented the grip of Muslim identity politics on the state of India. Now, when it was removed, we thought, and we described it as a liberating act. We at that time said that the edifice of a Muslim state on the territory of India has been dismantled. And we said that hopefully now the de facto edifice of this Muslim state in the form of internal policy, in the form of formulation, in the form of strategic imperatives, in the form of attitudes, intellectual proclivities, or intellectual habits, they will change, and we will see that J&K Union Territory is now ushering into an era of legitimate, what you call as integration with India. Now, having said this thing, I want to just underline two things. That the Hindus and all the non-Muslims were used not as political counterweights, but as cosmetic appendages to justify and legitimize a thoroughly and essentially a communal compromise with the Muslim identity politics in J&K. And Hindus had already suffered a genocide in Kashmir, which Indian state did not recognize. And the genocide and the jihad started spilling over into the Jammu. So in this entire process, what was scaring us was not only the survival, immediate survival. What was staring at the patriotic people of Jammu and Kashmir state was how to ultimately address the national interest and how to address the survival interest. For addressing the survival interest, it was critical to recognize that the arrangement which Indian state made or the Indian political class made with the political leadership of Kashmir, that arrangement had scarcely failed. Coexistence had been rejected, and Hindus were on the throes of a very clear existential war. A battle of survival was staring ahead in front of them. So this whole situation made it critical, not only from the survival perspective, but from the national perspective, that will the population of Jammu survive this onslaught? Population of Kashmiri Pandits could not survive the onslaught in Kashmir Valley. The communal experimentation, ultimately the communal contract which was created with the Muslims of Kashmir, the Muslim leadership of Kashmir, which was described as the refutation of two-nation theory and the victory of secularism, that had ultimately reached a climax when the Hindus of Kashmir were thoroughly religiously clean. And it was, the jihad was spilling over to Jammu, it was spilling over to whole of rest of India, and the genocidal war was spilling over into Jammu. How to respond to it? The state of India and the political class of India wanted to fudge it. They wanted to cover it at all levels. And for them, the critique of this arrangement was most embracing. The critique of this arrangement by the Hindus, by the non-Muslims, was most embracing. And we could see that the desperation was there, that somehow, how could we make these non-Muslim segments of the population to recognize that they're being assigned a status of a buffer or a sandbag is a strategic imperative, and they have to agree to live in this type of a situation. That type of a situation is still now. I don't think at any level, from strategic point of view, from a military point of view, from a political point of view, there is a discourse which we could see, which would recognize that the survival of Hindus in J&K state is critical, which would recognize the reversal of genocide of Hindus of Kashmir is critical ultimately for the future of India. In hushed tones, in back rooms, people would talk. Strategic experts would say they will talk, but formally they could not take the discussion. They will not take the discourse into the realm of this arena, because everybody thought that it was politically correct to discuss this issue. Kashmiri Hindu genocide was described as a migration, in spite of the fact when JKLF was banned, Government of India declared that a genocide had been unleashed by JKLF on the Hindus of Kashmir. Still, the Hindus of Kashmir were treated as migrants. The viciousness of the situation was that the Hindus of Jammu, they were also treated as a buffer, as a sandbag. Now, when I am telling you this thing,
please conclude, Dr. Sir. We're short of time.
Okay. We have reached a stage where we have to basically re-examine the whole paradigm of the nation building in J&K. Balancing and counterbalancing will not help. The cardinal argument should be that the patriotic nationalist population segments have to be saved, they have to be preserved. The type of dispensation which has been evolved, it has destroyed them thoroughly. And that makes the reorganization of the existing Jammu and Kashmir an imperative necessity. And I think the reorganization with this perspective in Kashmir create a foothold for the Hindus of Kashmir. It has to be seen not only as a secular foothold, it has to be seen as a geopolitical foothold, and separate Jammu from Kashmir, rest of Kashmir. This is a critical necessity because if northern frontier of India has to be stabilized, then the population segments who have no problem to be problems with India, with the nation of India, they have to be consolidated. I think we are still far away from this realization. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. You've given us a very good insight into the history of formation of the present, this bifurcation of J&K state. And you've also highlighted how exactly these things came about, how the hegemony was granted to part of the J&K state from Delhi into their sort of arena of things, into their scheme of things, and how it ultimately affected the part of Jammu that it is today, and it is asking for its separate statehood, is asking for a separate entity, not only to sort of stabilize its own self, but also to act as a buffer, because whatever the radicalization, whatever extremism which has been transported from Pakistan into Kashmir, into Jammu and India, it should not be allowed to sort of go further. So maybe you have a point on that, and we respect whatever views you have given, and I'm sure you've given us a good analysis of that.
Please like and subscribe.